Hello, my name is Adam W. Rodriguez, and welcome to my channel. I am your host here at the Art of AWR. Today I'm going to be doing another heavy metal book tag, baby! I have been wanting to do my own heavy metal book tag, but before I create my own, I wanted to check out into the YouTubeverse and see if there were other heavy metal book tags. I found two that were in English. There are several that are in Spanish, and I'm just not brave enough to try to do them in Spanish, but I am happy to do these two. I want to participate in the existing heavy metal book tags before I create my own. I've already done one, and this is number 2. It is called Rock Yo Metalhead Book Tag. Da, 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 da. I added the Jono. This particular book tag is made by a lady named Ammalyrical, and she is from the Netherlands. Her channel is called Ammalyrical. It is excellent. I've watched several of her videos. I would have never discovered her if I hadn't been looking for heavy metal book tags. So thank you, Heavy Metal, for creating a bridge between myself and Ammalyrical's awesome channel. She does a lot of book reviews. She reviews books, most of which I have never heard of, which I always appreciate. I love seeing book reviewers talk about books that I have read so that I can get like other opinions of books that I'm familiar with. But I also really do enjoy the diversity of books from people that read stuff that I don't. I love that kind of thing. It just widens my perspective and widens my horizons for different types of books that I could possibly be interested in reading. She has several other types of videos. She is a linguist. She speaks several languages. I'm pretty sure English is not her first language. And she talks about aspects of language in her videos. She also does videos about neurodivergence and her own experience with autism. And she starts a bunch of really wonderful conversations in her videos that I think are super important. And, you know, she's given me some extra perspective on autism and neurodivergence and stuff like that. If you want to check out some of her videos, I'm going to leave her information in the description below. Ammalyrical, thank you for this wonderful heavy metal and rock and roll book tag. I'm looking forward to jumping right in. But before I begin, I would like to invite you, the viewer, to subscribe to my channel. If you like videos about art, reading, books, literature, writing, and all that kind of fun, creative stuff, subscribe to my channel, maybe like this video, maybe even hit that bell so that you get new notifications every time a new episode drops, and then leave a comment in the comment section. We can have a conversation, because I've got a lot of books that I'm going to talk about in this here book tag. Let us begin. It is called Rock Yo Metalhead Book Tag, created by Ammalyrical. Each particular question, there are 10 questions. Each one of them is based off of a prompt. And these prompts are different sort of subgenres of metal and rock and roll. So, question number 1. The subgenre is Viking metal. And the question or the prompt is a book with dark themes running through. So I picked A Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess. I read this book a long time ago. I was like maybe 15 years old. It was back when I was trying to read more, I don't know, shocking books or whatever. Anyway, I just watched the Kubrick film, which everybody probably knows about, starring Malcolm McDowell, which was relatively decent to the book itself. As far as like, you know, trying to keep to some of the themes. The main theme of the book is behavioralism, really. It's about a guy who is just kind of choosing to be bad. He even talks a little bit about like what it would be to be good and how it is to be good, but he ultimately chooses to be an awful person. The character is called Alex, and Alex is this young boy who is the leader of this gang where he uses all sorts of weird alternate language. It's sort of this dystopian future where language has evolved into odd words, and you use a lot of context to kind of figure out what these words mean. He's a gang leader who goes out and commits ultra violence with his gang members or his droogs, D-R-O-O-G-S. It's just another one of those weird words that the book itself creates. Alex is an awful person who surrounds himself with awful people and does awful deeds, and the book is just about him just sort of enjoying being awful. I remember reading it back in the day. It's considered a dark comedy. I remember being a little disturbed as I read it, even when I was like laughing at how bad these people are. And then there are, moments of like rape and murder and brutality where I'm just like, it's one of those kind of books. It's cringy for the sake of cringy at places, but it's cleverly written, and I remember liking it. I need to reconnect with it. I wonder what 50-year-old me would think of a book, especially since the last time I read it, it was 15-year-old me. The wonders never cease. I think I might reconnect with that book this year. So, thank you for this book tag to make me start thinking about reconnecting with old books. And, A Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess. It's worth a read. Question number 2. Folk metal. The folklore is real. Choose a retelling. Okay, so this was a really easy one for me. I picked Grendel by John Gardner. Grendel is a creature from the epic poem Beowulf. This is a retelling of Beowulf, but it's from Grendel's perspective. Grendel being the adversary in the first part of the Beowulf poem. Beowulf, rips his arm off and Grendel dies. But the actual book itself, Beowulf doesn't show up until the end of the book. This is mostly about Grendel's relationships with like his mother and like other supernatural creatures that actually appear in the Beowulf poem. He visits with the dragon, who is eventually, the destructor of Beowulf himself. And it's a really cool scene. I remember having a lot of prophetic moments, a lot of philosophical moments. And it talks about Beowulf's interaction with humans and humanity in general. It's a really cool book. I remember liking it a lot. I think it's the book that John Gardner is most known for. It came out in 1971. I remember reading it like in 94, 95. I might reconnect with this particular book as well. It was a pretty interesting book. Grendel by John Gardner, a retelling of Beowulf from the perspective of Grendel. Cool book. Question number 3. Celtic metal. All those runes. Choose a character that uses runes. Well, this was very specific, and I was like, what the heck am I going to do with this? I thought about talking about, Full Metal Alchemist or maybe Doctor Strange, but what I ended up thinking about novel-wise was Thorin Oakenshield from The Hobbit, J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit. And he kind of haphazardly, sideways uses the runes himself, right? He shows up in Rivendell with his entourage of dwarves and Gandalf and, of course, the reluctant Hobbit Bilbo Baggins. They end up in Rivendell with this map that Thorin has inherited, and the king, the elfish king of Rivendell, holds the map up to the moonlight, and these moon letters appear on the map, these moon runes. And it shows Thorin and company the way to the secret door in the Lonely Mountain so that they can access the treasure that is being guarded by Smaug, the dragon. It's a really great book. I think The Hobbit is my favorite book of the J.R.R. Tolkien Rings series. It's meant for a younger audience, but I think it's the most accessible. It's the easiest one to read. And honestly, like, I love the characters in it a lot. So it's your introduction to guys like Bilbo and Gandalf. So it's and Middle-earth itself. I mean, at least for my part. So it was a really great book, and everyone should read it if you haven't already. It's very popular, and most people have already read it. But if you haven't, read The Hobbit. It's great. I think it's the most accessible of the Tolkien books. So if you find yourself intimidated by the Lord of the Rings at large, read The Hobbit. It's easier, and I think it's one of the better books anyway. Cool. That was question 3. Question number 4. Medieval metal / rock. All right. A king or queen in a fantasy that completely rocks it. In parentheses, this can be a literal king or queen or an amazingly strong book or character. I'm going with a fantasy king, and the king that I'm going to talk about is Kull, the Conqueror, also known as Kull of Atlantis. That's Kull. Kull. He's a really great character that was created by Robert E. Howard. If you don't know who Robert E. Howard is, he's the guy that created Conan the Barbarian. He also created a slew of other characters. He was an extremely prolific writer, and tragically, he committed suicide when he was like in his 20s. I mean, the amount of literature out there that is by Robert E. Howard, largely short stories. In fact, I think it's all short stories, but still an amazingly prolific writer and an incredible storyteller on top of that. It's very tragic. I would have loved to have seen what Robert Howard had created by the time he got into his 50s and 60s. I mean, that would have been amazing. But anyway, before he tragically died, he had only published 3 Kull the Conqueror stories. And since his death, they have found manuscripts of several other Kull the Conqueror. I think I've read more Kull the Conqueror than I have Conan. It's great stuff. One of the other things I'd like to mention is that the character of Thulsa Doom was the adversary of Kull the Conqueror. If you're familiar with the John Milius film, Conan the Barbarian, the one that stars Arnold Schwarzenegger, the villain in it, played by the amazing James Earl Jones, is called Thulsa Doom. Thulsa Doom never appeared in any Conan fiction, at least that I know of, but I'm pretty sure he hasn't appeared in any Conan fiction. Originally, that villain was the arch nemesis of Kull the Conqueror. Although they did kind of mesh up some stuff. I mean, the original Thulsa Doom had like a skull's head and stuff like that. So they definitely, you know, moved around. I don't think he was a worshiper of Set either. So anyway, I think there was a villain of Conan's that was a worshiper of Set. So like I said, John Milius mishmashed things together, but what an amazing villain. I mean, and largely I think it's because James Earl Jones is just such a rock and roller. All right, that's me talking about Kull the Conqueror. It's amazing stuff. Read more Robert E. Howard, you guys. He's a great storyteller. You'll be doing yourself a favor. Next, question number 5. Gothic metal. So, choose a book with a depressed, down, or pessimistic main character. I had a lot of trouble thinking of a main character, but every time I would try to like kind of go into my Rolodex of characters in the back of my head, one just kept coming to the forefront. He's not a main character, but he's a very recognizable character. Most people know him, and that is Eeyore from the Winnie the Pooh series, created by A.A. Milne. What a wonderful character. He's awesome. He was one of my favorite things, I guess maybe other than Tigger, when I would watch the old Disney movies with the assortment of cool characters in Winnie the Pooh. Eeyore is such a wonderful character. One of the things that I've always loved about Eeyore is it doesn't matter how sad or kind of grumpy or depressed Eeyore is. His friends love him. His friends include him. And they're always there for him. Eeyore is an amazing character. Let's move on to question 6. Speed metal! An extremely fast-paced or action-packed book. I'm going to talk about the book that I read most recently that was incredibly fast-paced, and that was And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. It was an amazing book. It was an amazing story, and I am an incredibly slow reader. So the fact that I burned through this book in 3 days, I mean, I picked it up day 1, couldn't put it down. Picked it up day 2, couldn't put it down. Picked it up day 3, and I finished that mother. It was a really good book. I did a review of this particular book. You can see it in my video archive. It is got a lot of really cool history in it. There's a problematic history to the title of the book that I'm not going to go too much at length here in my video, but there's some really, really cool history that I touch on in that video if you would like to check it out. It's a wonderful story. It's about this group of 10 people who end up on this island. They're secluded, and they can't get off this island. And within a period of a couple of days, each one of them begins to die off one by one. And it is well written. This was one of the most sold and translated copies of any fiction book out there. Agatha Christie, this particular book is like, it's up on par with things like the Bible and the works of Shakespeare as far as numbers of copies sold. So there's a lot to be said for a book that has that kind of circulation. And one of the things that can be said is that it is excellent. So you should read it. It's a wonderful book. Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None. Question number 7. New Wave. A book on acid, creating a transcendent atmosphere. You cannot get more acid-riddled than the book Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter S. Thompson. It's a wonderful book. I read this back around the same time I read A Clockwork Orange, when I was looking for more shocking literature to read. And it was fairly shocking. It's a good book. It's what Hunter S. Thompson likes to call gonzo journalism, which is sort of like a combination of kind of like psychedelic fiction and actual journalism. It's a really fun story. It's about a guy named Raoul Duke and his companion Dr. Gonzo. Dr. Gonzo. They come into Las Vegas, and they're there to do a report on this race that's like out in the desert, but it keeps getting like interrupted because these guys continually are just indulging in massive amounts of psychedelic drugs, and they end up like trashing the hotel room, wrecking a car, and having all sorts of just like insane hallucinations. All the while they're just like commenting on the deterioration of the American dream and 60s counterculture in general. It is some wonderful stuff. I remember really enjoying the book. I need to reconnect with it. 15-year-old me and 50-year-old me have two different experiences nowadays, especially when it comes to like drugs and counterculture. So like, I'd be interested to see what I think about it nowadays. So I might be reconnecting with that book as well. Thank you, Rock Your Metalhead Book Tag, for making me remember a book that I might want to reread. I'm going to do that, you guys. I'm going to do that. Question number 8. Symphonic metal. A character completely in tune with himself or herself. I'm going to go with a himself, and the himself I'm going to refer to is Sherlock Holmes, created by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Sherlock Holmes is a wonderful character. He is a guy who is a hardcore, deductive reasoning style intellectual. He's one of these guys who understands his own strength and he understands his own weaknesses. And as brilliant as Sherlock Holmes is, he's always on a path to become even more brilliant. It's one of the things that I love about the character, is like he's a guy that is in constant pursuit of a greater mind. And I think that's a really, really just great model for a cool character. He is like the epitome of the armchair detective character. Although Edgar Allan Poe did create C. Auguste Dupin in the Murders of the Rue Morgue maybe 50 years prior. But Sherlock Holmes is considered just like this pivotal character when it comes to detective style characters. In fact, I think Agatha Christie even commented that she modeled Hercule Poirot off of Sherlock Holmes himself. So he's the model of many a detective ever since. Wonderful character. He knows who he is, and he knows how to even be better than how he is. He's an unapologetic jerk at times because of his big bad brain, and I think it's a wonderful character. I've read several of the short stories. I just got a copy of Hound of the Baskervilles. I'm surprised I've never read that. Sign of Four is another one, and I think there are a few other novel-length Sherlock Holmes pieces. Wonderful reading. You should check it out. Next. Question 9. All right, we're into the rock section of this Rock Your Metalhead book tag. The rock section. Pop rock. Who is a contemporary that rocks? I love this question because when I started talking to some of my friends about like my booktube channel, I'm like, hey, yeah, I was reviewing this and I was reviewing this. And they were like, dude, do you read anything that was maybe written in the last 20 or 30 years? And I was just like, oh, I guess you're right. Yeah, I do read a lot of like classic stuff, a lot of old stuff. So like new authors are always kind of a treat for me, especially when I find ones that I really, really dig. This last year I did, yes, read a few books that were written within the last century. And I'll even say within the last 20 or so years. And those books are The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones is wonderful. I'm about to do a review about it. But the one guy that I want to talk about is Scott Lynch. He wrote a book called The Lies of Locke Lamora, and he's done a trilogy since. I think the last of those were written in like 2013. So yeah, you know, it was a while back, but still, you know, it's a contemporary, man. It's a contemporary. What I want to say about Scott Lynch is he writes fantasy fiction, which I love. But he also isn't afraid to be funny. He isn't afraid to be funny in his narrator voice, And sometimes he's hilarious when he's just doing character stuff. His characters are just like genuinely funny people. So the dialogue is funny, but he maintains this nice kind of gritty style story. So it gets dark, plenty dark, and bits of levity sort of help to break it up and make my reading mood kind of get some levels going there, right? It's not like satirical, zany style Terry Pratchett fantasy. This is a great brand of like a guy who's telling you a dark tale without being afraid of making sure that there's some levity interspersed in there. And that's what I really like about Scott Lynch. So I'm looking forward to reading more of his books. I've only read that one, The Lies of Locke Lamora. I did do a review about it. In fact, I think it was my very first like novel review. The first review I did was a comic book one, but the very second one I did was Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch. And that's who I'm talking about. That's who folks should read. Go read Scott Lynch. He's great. Next and final question. Classic rock. I have to sing all these out. A book or series that makes you feel nostalgia. Now, guys, this might be cliche, all right? But I think I was just kind of like raised at the right time for this story. Because like there was a Disney movie that came out when I was a kid, and I remember watching that, but I watched it after the book was read to me. It was read to me by my mom, and she read to me and my brother and my sister, and I remember getting to the end of it and just weeping my eyes out, and I immediately went and checked it out at the library and reread it and read all the subsequent books in this series. That book is Old Yeller by Fred Gipson. This book was probably one of the first books that I remember reading in its entirety as a small boy. It's about a young man who is now the man of the house, right? His father is away, he's taking care of his mother, he's taking care of his little brother. And then he encounters this old, yellow, one-eared dog that eventually becomes his constant companion and protector. The book itself does get fairly metal. I mean, there are a lot of like fangs and fights and blood and gore. I remember one chapter where there's a lot of entrails involved, and I was just like, gosh, this is so gory. I love it. Oh, yeah, give me more. This is actually, I think, the old edition. I found this bad boy in a half-price books, and like, yeah, you can see like where it had the old, some of the library stuff going on in there. But this particular book, I got it, and I couldn't help but get it, because I remember one of the things that I loved about it were these great pen and ink drawings. I mean, look how metal is that? Old Yeller battles the bear. Yes, that's so awesome. These are great pictures, and the pen and ink work is amazing. So, yeah, I was really glad I picked this up. Oh, it still smells like an old book. Oh, it's so great. It's so great. What you need to do is sit here and watch me huff books for 5 minutes. Yes, give me more. All right, guys. There are 2 other books subsequently from Old Yeller. One was called Savage Sam, which was about a puppy of Old Yeller's. And then the last one was called Little Arliss, and it was a kind of coming-of-age story. Travis was coming of age in Old Yeller, and then the last tale is Little Arliss coming of age in the final book. They weren't near as tragic as Old Yeller was. So I think, Fred Gipson was like, all right, I've broken your heart. Let's get a little levity in these last couple of books, in which he did. So, we have come to the end of the Rock Yo Metal Head book tag created by Ammalyrical. Thank you, Ammalyrical, for such a wonderful book tag. I had a great time doing these prompts and talking about books and characters and fun stuff like that. So, I hope you enjoyed watching this video. I know I enjoyed making it. We will see you here next time at the Art of AWR. Ciao.